Anyway, let's not be catty. So onward to the talking points memo, countering Donald Trump. It's clear this convention is designed to portray Mr. Trump, who will join us in just a few moments, as a man unworthy of political office. To me, that's kind of a waste of time. Everybody knows Mr. Trump. Even the dimmest among us can formulate an opinion on his worthiness. What is important, however, is how the Democratic leadership is positioning the party. Last night, Michelle Obama said this.
That is the story of this country, the story that has brought me to this stage tonight, the story of generations of people who felt the lash of bondage, the shame of servitude, the sting of segregation, but who kept on striving and hoping and doing what needed to be done so that today I wake up every morning in a house that was built by slaves. Don't let anyone ever tell you that this country isn't great, that somehow we need to make it great again, because this right now is the greatest country on earth.
The First Lady directly repudiating the Republican mantra that the USA is in decline. By the way, I'll deal with Mrs. Obama's slave White House analysis in the tip of the day later on. Senator Elizabeth Warren also spoke last night. She had little to say other than Trump is bad and Hillary is good. Senator Warren continues to like socialism as well, but not as much as Bernie Sanders, a socialist standard bearer who's a bit disappointed the way the whole thing turned out.
I understand that many people here in this convention hall and around the country are disappointed about the final results of the nominating process. I think it's fair to say that no one is more disappointed than I am. But to all of our supporters here and around the country, I hope you take enormous pride in the historical accomplishments we have achieved.
Talking Points is not quite sure what historical accomplishments have been achieved. But it is kind of stunning that about 43% of Democratic primary voters want a socialist in the White House. Again, that's not an accomplishment, that is a mystery. To be sure, Bernie Sanders is not a phony, he's a feisty, honest guy, but he would absolutely take over the private economy if he were president, telling each and every American what they can earn, what they can keep. Anyway, Bernie Sanders, history for the moment. And Hillary Clinton has received her party's nomination for president. The first American woman in history to do so. Like her or not, that is an accomplishment. But whether she can effectively counter Donald Trump is all that matters right now. And that's the memo. Now for the top story. Just a few hours ago, I spoke with Mr. Trump, who was in Florida. So the Democratic convention so far has been to counter you and your themes. Number one is that President Obama saved the country from a depression, that he inherited such a bad economic condition in 2008 that the economy's not his fault, and he actually saved us from Armageddon. You buying any of that?
No, because it was going to work out, Bill. It always works out. We always have bad periods, and that was a bad period, but we've had many of them, and frankly, it works out. And they could have done things a lot differently, and our recovery has been a very weak recovery. You look at the recovery, it's the weakest recovery in history. It's the weakest recovery on record. And you look at joblessness, and I'm not talking about the phony 5% number. I'm talking about the 21 or 22%. That is the real number where people can't find jobs, they can't find work, where we're losing our jobs and our factories and everything else to other countries, including Mexico. So, you know the real numbers. You see the real numbers.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers aren't good, but it's an interesting argument because it's speculative and nobody can see. You can't deny how bad it was with Lehman Brothers folding and all of that and a lot of panic. But on the other hand, 8 years is 8 years, and I tend to agree that the economy should be better than it is now. What about the minimum wage? You got hammered on that by Bernie Sanders last night. What's your vision for a federal minimum wage? How much?
Well, he lied last night. I mean, it was a total lie, and everybody said it. In fact, some of the folks on your network said, wow, that was really a lie. He said that I wanted to go less than minimum wage. This is a new one because I'm the one Republican that said in some cases we have to go more than minimum wage.
Well, give me a number.
I like is states.
Give me a number.
Well, let me give you a concept because I think it's a good concept. You go with the states. Let the states make the determination. Because if you take New York, it's very expensive to live in New York, and they need more than $7, $8, $9. So you go with the states.
But the states have the authority now to do that. But there has to be a federal minimum wage.
They do.
What would you set the federal minimum wage
There doesn't have to be. Well, I would leave it and raise it somewhat. You need to help people, and I know it's not very Republican to say.
Well, give me $10.
People, but
10?
I would say 10. I would say 10. But with the understanding that somebody like me is going to bring back jobs, I don't want people to be in that $10 category for very long. But the thing is, Bill, let the states make the deal.
Yeah, but they do have the right to do that now because you could have a state that raises it to 15. And I would also, and this is just an aside, teenagers could make a little bit less, first job if you're 17, to get them in the workforce. But anyway, let's go on to...
let me just finish because a friend of mine is a tremendous employer. And what he did is he said by raising it and by doing certain things, it took the incentive. He pays people an incentive basis. If they're really good, he gives them incentive. Nobody's ever heard of this before, but a lot of companies do it.
Yeah, I know.
And he said by raising it, they already get the incentive. No, I believe it should be raised. But when Bernie Sanders said that I want to go less than what the minimum wage, I mean, honestly, Bill, these people are lying so much. And every fact checker said Trump never said that.
So what you got you on the record is $10 minimum wage federally, and states can do what they want.
No, you have me on record as saying the states are going to raise it higher than that.
Yeah, and they can if they want. Climate change. They said that you called climate change a hoax. Is that true?
I want clean air and I want clean water. And if you look at what's going on in China and all of these other countries that talk, but they laugh behind our back at what we're doing, we want clean air, clean water. I've gotten many environmental awards. Believe me, I know what I'm talking about. But we have to have crystal clear water and crystal clean air.
Okay, but did you ever call climate change a hoax?
Well, I might have, because when I look at some of the things that are going on, in fact, if you look at Europe, where they had their big summit a couple of years ago, where people were sending out emails, scientists practically calling it a hoax, and they were laughing at it. So, yeah, I probably did.
Do you believe that man-made fossil fuels and gases have eroded the environment so that the sun is more intense on Earth? Because that's the basic thing. Do you believe that's happening?
Well, they're saying man-made, and I say it could have a minor impact, but nothing to what they're talking about. And what it's doing is putting us at a tremendous disadvantage as a country because other countries are not adhering to the rules. We are, and it makes it impossible for our businesses to compete.
That's true.
We're adhering to these very strict rules, and you look at China and you look at all of these other countries, practically all of them, they're not adhering to the rules, and our jobs are being jeopardized, and not being jeopardized, they're being taken away. Our companies are unable to compete.
All right. NATO made some controversial comments. I just want you to clarify them because I hate taking it from the press because I agree with you that you're not going to get a fair shot in the press ever. So you got small countries in Eastern Europe that Putin might mess around with. That would trigger a response from the United States, and you kind of seem to indicate that maybe you wouldn't respond.
Well, I think I've been treated fairly, reasonably on that, and the New York Times covered it fairly accurately, which is unusual for them because usually they don't. The fact is we are protecting so many countries that are not paying for the protection. They're not living up to the bargain. They're not living up to their agreement. We have an agreement. We're going to protect countries. And I like NATO. I like the concept of NATO. But it's obsolete because we don't cover terrorism. And I've been saying that for a while. And now all of a sudden, because I've been saying it, they have a division where they're going to start really covering terrorism.
But I think that was because of me, not you.
Well, wait a minute, Bill. Yeah, well, it was because of me. It wasn't because of you in this case, and you know that. And the other thing, and because it was obsolete. And now all of a sudden they have a division. They're going to start. No, wait a minute. When a country isn't paying us, and these are countries in some cases, in most cases, that have the ability to pay, and they're not paying because nobody's asking. We are funding 73% of the cost of NATO. So we're protecting all of these countries. They have an agreement to reimburse us and pay us, and they're not doing it. And if they're not going to do that, we have to seriously rethink at least those countries. It's very unfair. Right now, you have 5 countries that are paying their share. 5.
Okay, I agree.
Right.
If they're not paying this year, then they get booted out of the alliance, and that's it.
And you know what? Well, Bill, and you know what's been happening? People were saying, well, we have a treaty. Well, we do have a treaty. We have a treaty both ways. They're supposed to be paying. They're not paying. And the reason they're not paying because we're not asking for the money. And we are not in a, this isn't 40 years ago or 50 years ago where we can, do whatever we want to do. We owe $19 trillion. It's going to be $21 trillion very soon because of the horrible budget that was just made. We owe $19 trillion, and we're paying for all of these countries. They're not living up to their obligation,
right.
And then we're supposed to get into World War III. Now, let me just tell you, a lot of people, first they really didn't like what I was saying. Now, so many people are starting to agree with me. They're saying, you know what, Trump
I think
is
they
right.
have to pay.
And you watch. Hillary Clinton will now come out and say countries have to pay. And people are going to forget it, just like she did today, NAFTA. Just like today, she came out today with NAFTA. I've been saying we got to renegotiate with NAFTA or we have to get out because they're taking our jobs. Today, for the first time out of all these years that she's worked on this, and her husband signed it, it's one of the worst things ever signed from an economic development standpoint. She came out today and said, well, we're going to have to start thinking about renegotiating our deals. I've been saying this for a long time. She just came out. And you know why? Because what I've been saying makes sense to a lot of people.
But there's another reason,
too. I better get on that train pretty quickly.
There's another reason. It's a SOP, S-O-P, to Bernie Sanders. And that brings me to my last question. Have you ever spoken to Bernie Sanders? You ever talked to him?
No, I haven't.
Never in your life talked to him?
He's a tired man. He's exhausted. I think, frankly, in terms of his legacy, he's totally folded.
He's not that much older than you, though. There's only maybe a 2 or 3 years.
He's quite a bit older, but he wants to go home and he wants to go to bed. Honestly, for his legacy.
How do you know if you've never spoken to him? How do you know he wants to go to bed?
I think he's exhausted.
Well, he's exhausted.
You know what? For his legacy, he would have been better off playing it out. He's exhausted. He wants to go home and go to bed. But a lot of the Bernie Sanders people are going to come to me. You know why? Because I'm the best there is on trade. And I'm going to make new trade deals, and we're going to bring our jobs back to our country.
All right. Well, we always appreciate you making time for us. You know how busy you are. We have your running mate, Mike Pence, on tomorrow, and that should be interesting. We'll get him to define his view of the world. All right, Mr. Trump, as always, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Never boring. And again, Mike Pence will be with us on The Factor tomorrow evening. Next on The Rundown tonight. Why are the Democrats avoiding mentioning the ISIS terror group?